So guys, welcome back to our HandTrap tier list for the Spright format. I am planning on making a tier list for every format, and let's start with this format, the Spright format. I've already made a tier list for every deck in the Spright format. You can find it here on the info button on the right top corner of the screen, or you can just click on it on my channel. So what I will not do here is tell you which you should craft, which is the best staple card, because there is another video coming out where I will discuss this question. So in this video it's only about how good is this special hand trap in this current format, which is the Spright format, where as you have probably already experience yourself, most people play Spright on the ladder. So look at the hand traps and let's rank them as meta, which means they are best included in your main deck. Solid option, which means you can include them in your main deck. Niche means what it says. It is a good hand trap, but it only applies to niche circumstances, so it only maybe counters some decks that are played not very often. And then we have C and D, which we can like even further degrade these options. And let's say a D option you would basically never play, and a C option you could maybe play, or maybe play in a side deck if you play a tournament in the Master Duel format, but probably you would not play on the ladder. So let's start with Artifact Lancia, and I always want to go over the card first with you. So if you don't know the card, you can read it here. So Artifact Lancia is a card that like bans the opponent and you, if you activate it, from interacting with the banish pile. So you can not banish anything, banish any cards. This is a good card in the TCG in the actual format because there is Kashtira, and Kashtira plays a lot with banishing cards. So this is a good counter against Kashtira. In our own format in Master Duel, I think we don't need it at the moment because there is no deck that really interacts with the banish pile. Spright obviously doesn't. Spright is more like, if at all, graveyard focused, but not really graveyard focused. I mean, the runic variant of course is graveyard focused because of the runic spells going to graveyard then going back into your deck. So Artifact Lancia, though it is a good card, in this current meta it's not really useful, and I wouldn't even say it's a niche card. I would say it's more like C. So it's not like never ever use it, but it's like you basically do not want to use it. So the only use case which I can imagine is if there are many Flu on the Reese players, because the Flu on the Reese deck interacts with the banish pile, but there aren't on the current ranked ladder. So that is the only reason why this is not a D but C. So let's go for the next one. And for next one we have the Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. So Ghost Bell, this is a card that interacts mainly with the graveyard, and I think the most important in our meta effect is that you can negate the activation of a card that special summons a monster from graveyard. So what comes to mind here is Spright Elf. Spright Elf, if you don't know it, can revive a monster from the graveyard in every main phase, so in your own and in the opponent's main phase, a rank 2 monster, and this could stop that. This could negate that very strong effect. But as we will see, there are some better hand traps against Spright, though hand traps against Spright, they don't work particularly well, but this one is not very good because it's a very specific niche use case. You cannot even use it with like against runic Spright, because like putting runic spells back into the deck, that is not something. Oh, I'm sorry, from the graveyard to the hand deck. Or you could also like Ghost Bell this. Now, if the runic spells would get back added to the deck, you could also Ghost Bell this. So this could be used against Spright, but I think there are better options, which I will show you in a moment. So let's take this and let's put it as niche. As I said, there are options which you can use against Spright, but I wouldn't say solid in the case of put it in your deck, because I think there are better hand traps. So Psy-Frame Gear Gamma, this is a card that's pretty interesting. It always goes together with the other card, the Psy-Frame Driver, and then you can activate it when there are no cards on the field, if you control no cards on the field. So in your opponent's turn you could activate it, or in your own turn, and then you can negate the activation of a monster effect and also destroy it, which is very important. And you get these two bodies that get banished at the end of the turn. The interesting thing is that the Psy-Frame Driver can be activated, or can like have a place in a hand. It can be in the graveyard or in the deck, and at all times you can like pull it out of there, so it doesn't have to be only in the deck. So of course there are use cases for this. If the opponent uses his gigantic Spright, you can activate this, you can destroy it, and I think the part that makes this card useful in this meta is that you can basically activate it on every Spright part. So you could activate it on blue, you could activate it on jet, you could activate it on the gigantic Spright, and you could activate it on the Spright elf. So this is why this is a better card than the card we looked at before, and it also destroys the card, which is very important because Spright needs its bodies to be able to continue their place. So I would say this is really a solid option. It's also a pretty cheap hand trap, which we don't want to talk about here right now, but it's only a super rare, so it's pretty cheap and very affordable. This is a good option. If you have it, you can think about siding it in or putting it into your main deck, maybe 2 copies. I will go for 2 copies of these and then 1 copies of the Psy Frame Driver. So the next one we are talking about is Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, which is cool in the sense that it can negate and destroy gigantic Spright. So it reads, when a monster on the field activates its effect, or when a spell trap that is already face up on the field activates this effect. So you could also use this on Runic Fountain. Quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, destroy that card on the field. So this destroys Runic Fountain, and this destroys also gigantic Spright. So this is a pretty good hand trap in the current format, because Spright is running around everywhere. So I would also put this in solid, but maybe we could also put it in meta, but I think it's not meta in the sense that you have to put it in every deck. There are other cards that are meta and you have to put in every deck. So I would like put it here in the solid option category, but I think it's better than the Gamma. So next up is, let me check, but that's right. Next up is Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. So this is also a card of the Ghost Sister type, but I think it's one of the worst, or maybe even the worst. I have never seen it. It's an ultra rare. Doesn't really work for me. So if you don't know the card, it's like during either turn, except the end phase, you can discard this card and apply this effect this turn. Each time your opponent special summons an effect monster during the main or battle phase, you gain a life points equal to that monster's attack. So life points are basically a resource that is not very important right now in Yu-Gi-Oh! So this is not really good. I would put this in D. I think there are no real cases which you would put this in. It's not very useful. It's not very good. I would not consider putting this in or crafting this at all, and I cannot even imagine a situation where you would say, oh my god, I need this card in my deck to counter whatever. So this is just a generic bad hand trap. So Infinite Impermanence, I really love this card, though at the start I was sometimes confused about when I can activate it. So the really important part is the last sentence here. If you control no cards, you can activate this card from hand. And I was always like, in the beginning, like when I came back, I was like, oh man, I can activate this hand traps that are traps from my hand always. And then I was like, hey, why doesn't it work now? And yeah, but now I learned through many failures. So Infinite Impermanence, I think this is always a solid option because, as I said, you can activate it on your opponent's turn, which of course you can with every hand trap. And against Spright, this is also good because you can like negate the blue, you can negate jet, you can negate gigantic, you can negate the Spright elf, you can negate the Hugin, which searches the fountain. So this card is always very, very versatile, and I think you are not going to get punished, or you're not regretting it if you put this in your main deck. You can, it depends on what your main deck can like handle, but you can put it in 3 times and be very happy with it. So the basic Spright deck, like without the runic package, could without a problem put this in 3 times and be very happy with it. This is just a solid card, and the good thing about it is that this is not only good against the Spright matchup, because every deck runs something that you can use Infinite Impermanence on and get value. So you could Infinite Impermanence the Sword Soul of Taya to stop Sword Soul plays, or the Fawn of Albas, or the Haluba, the Despia guy, or even like the Lubellion. So against every deck you can find something that you can use this on, so that's a really good one. DD Crow, this is more of a niche application. I would say this becomes better when Tier Element comes out, because Tier Element heavily interacts with the graveyard, so you can take their Tier Elements names and then banish them so they cannot use their effect. In this current format, I would say it's not that good, because it always yeah, have to be like it's only interaction with the graveyard. This is the only thing that this thing can do, and you have to pitch it from the hand. So of course you could like banish something that Sprite Elf wants to revive, or you could like banish a runic card so they only get 2 runic cards back instead of 3. But everything that this card does isn't very impactful, at least in this meta, so I would definitely not consider it in the main deck. We could say it's niche, but so I would put it in C. I would put this over this when I had the choice, and I think it's on the same level as this, because this also lets your opponent not banish any cards, so these have something in common. So this is the like bigger brother of the DD Crow, and it was limited to 2. I don't really know why, because this is a good counter against tier elements, and I was thinking that they wanted to like weaken tier elements, and putting these at 3 would have weakened tier elements. So it's at 2. It's mainly played in Fluent Reese, which, as I mentioned, will be a good contender for tier elements. So it reads: if you have no cards in your graveyard, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, and until the end of the next turn, which is a pretty long like time frame, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So this is really good against tier elements, because they need to play over the graveyard, which they can't if they are under shifter. And if you shifter in your turn, the shifter effect is also active in their turn. So they basically are skipping a complete turn. So this is really strong, but I think it's not that strong in the current meta. I mean, of course, it's not bad against Spright, or something like Mefmec. Mefmec needs its graveyards. The graveyard Mefmec normal summons, or the graveyard Mefmec guys, they need it for the super factorial, and if they are banished, then they cannot do anything. Also, the Spright cards need to be in the grave to be revived with Spright Elf, and the runic cards need to be in the grave to get put back into the deck. So this is not a bad card, but I find it hard to play, or to say like put it in the main deck or put it in every deck. So I think it's a solid option, but it's definitely worse than these, and I would put also Infinite Impermanence over here at the top. So, oh, the next card. I love the next card. But the next card is more of a TCG or OCG card. It's more of a best of 3 card, because evening match, if you don't know it, if you play it, at the end of the battle phase, so you basically go draw, stand by main, and then battle phase. And the funny thing is, when you do this in the TCG, the opponent already knows, oh no, he's going to battle phase without doing anything before, he will evenly match me. So then you can say, okay, evenly matched, and then the opponent has to banish so many cards that they only have the same number of cards as you, and you have only 1 card evenly matched, so they have to banish everything besides 1 card. So let's say they have a complete board, like 3 set cards, 4 monsters, a field spell, then they have to banish so much that they only have 1. And the funny thing is, if they have a token, like a Nibiru token or something, they have to banish everything but the token, because the token cannot be banished. It has to be the one that stays on the field. That's a pretty funny side thing. So how good is it when it comes to Master Duel and the current format? So as we are playing a best of 1 format, this is already like, okay. So if we would play a best of 3 format, this would be in every side deck, and everyone would side this in when they are going second. And you can see this when you look at maybe Master Duel and you look at the tournaments where they play best of 3s. You can see this in every side deck, and it's always, or basically always, a free off, because it's such a good card. But in Master Duel, and not especially in our current format, but in Master Duel best of 1, I think this is more of a niche card. This is a good card, but you have to have a deck that can play it, like Labyrinth. Labyrinth can play this card because Labyrinth can like get advantages of having many trap cards, and you kind of forget this is at least trap card. So decks that can work well with trap cards, they can incorporate this in the main deck, but I would never say put this thing in the main deck. But what you could do is, this is a super rare, so if you are missing like other hand traps here that are ultra rares, you could put this in, and this is a pretty good card, especially if you're going second. Then this can basically win you the game. But as we are in the best of 1 format, I think this card can never be like, oh, put it in every deck, besides having maybe a Labyrinth deck or another trap deck. So this card is funny because I myself, I didn't know this card, so I had to look this up because I've never seen it. What this does is when the opponent special summons a link monster, you can special summon this card from your hand and then draw cards equal to the number of link monsters your opponent controls +1. And then shuffle cards from your hand into the deck equal to the number of link monsters they control. So it's basically a draw one more and then put cards back. I mean, it's good because you can draw cards and then decide for yourself which ones you want to put back. It's a good effect, but it's super niche. I have never seen it, and I think there is a reason why I have never seen it. You also have to consider how many link decks there are in the current format. I mean, there is, of course, MathMech, which mainly plays link monsters, but I think that's it. So yeah, this is a D card. I think there's a reason why you never see this, and yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to Maxi, and I think, do I have to say anything about this card? Of course, this is like meta. It's like banned in the TCG, it's at free in the OCG, and this is one of the most like debated card of all times. I would say this is probably the best card in the whole game. Because yeah, I don't have to explain Maxi to you. You can basically win the game by using this. Let's say you went first and you build a big board, and then you go through your opponent and you Maxi them. Then whatever they do, if they break your board, fine, you draw 20,000 cards. This is just an insane card and like the best card in the game, and also a reason why in Master Duel here we basically always spray triple Ash because Ash can counter this. So in TCG they aren't playing that many Ashes, or like Ash is more like a format thing. If the format needs it, they play it. But here and in the OCG, Ash is basically always played because of Maxi, because everyone puts Maxi 3 times in the deck. So just put it in. I think in nearly every meta this is like an awesome card. The only deck this is bad against is Flaunderies, because they only normal summon, but yeah, that's it. Nibiru, I like this card. I think I don't have to read it to you. I think it's a strong card, but not in the current meta. I think in the current meta it's more of a niche card, because the thing is, against Spright, this card is bad, because if they summon the red, or if they summon the gigantic Spright, which they do every time they summon something, then you cannot longer use this. So against the best deck in the meta, this card is not very good. So in conclusion, it's not very good. It's bad against Flaunderies if they play it. It's also not very good against like something like Exorcister, because they don't summon that much. It's good against MathMech, but how many MathMech decks do you see? And it's okay against Sword Soul. I mean, if Sword Soul makes the Baron first before the Grandmaster, it's obviously bad. So all in all, it's a pretty niche card. So the next one is Ghost Mourner and Moonlight Chill, which you also don't see very much. If your opponent special summons a monster, you can discard this card and target one of those face-up monsters and negate the effect until the end of turn. And then this also has like, your opponent takes damage equal to its original attack if it leaves the field. So I think that doesn't come up very often. Yeah, it's an okay card. I think there are better cards like Effect Veiler, pretty niche usage. You can always better put an Infinite Impermanence in, I think. This is not a bad card, but there are cards that do the same but better, so I would never put it in, and honestly I never saw it in the game. Next one is Gourds. I would put it here because I don't think this is ever played in Master Duel meta. I played this this was one of the last cards when I first played Yu-Gi-Oh! And played the paper TCG. This was one of the last cards I bought or I owned, which is really cool. When I think it's when you don't have any monsters controlling and the opponent attacks you, you can summon this and a token. It's a really cool card, but yeah, it's not very good in Master Duel. We don't need to talk about it very much. Next one is Skullmeister. When a card is activated in your opponent's graveyard, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard and negate that effect. Once again, not a bad card, because you can use it on the runic cards, you can use it on the Spright cards like Spright Elf, but this is also a case of when Tier Elements comes, this card will get better. So for now, I would say this is more of a C option, not super bad, don't ever put it in, but when Tier Element comes, this will be much better. So next one is a Droll and Lockbird. Droll and Lockbird says if a card is added from the main deck to your opponent's hand except during the draw phase, you can send this to the grave, and then he can no longer add more cards to his hand this turn from the main deck to the hand. So if you like activate it on the Spright Blue searches the Jet, then the Jet can no longer search another card. Droll and Lockbird is a pretty good card. I think it's also quite good in this current format. It's also it's still a niche card. I would not put it like consistently in the main deck. It has a case against many decks in the meta because it can be used at many interaction points against most of the decks. But the impact is not that good, and I would always put like these 5 over this, at least in the current format. Next one is Effect Veiler, which is like an infinite impermanence as a monster, basically. During your opponent's main phase, you can only use it, that's important. And then you can send this card from hand to grave and target one effect monster your opponent controls and negate that effect. This is notably not once per turn, so if you have more Effect Veilers, you can do it like more often, which is pretty good. I think, in my opinion, I like Infinite Impermanence more. These cards are basically doing the same, but this is limited to the main phase, and this also has the side effect that you maybe know it, and you maybe have played into it like I did in the past, and sometimes even do. When you use the impermanence on a monster, the column that you put your impermanence in, when you set it, all cards in there are negated. So I think this is a worse infinite impermanence, therefore it's a niche card for me, but I think it's one of the better niche cards. I would also put this here. I would love to put it evenly matched in meta, but as we are playing best of one, it's not possible. So next one is Red Reboot, which some of you might not know. It's a trap interactive card. When your opponent activates a trap, negate the activation, and if you do set that card, so his card that's negated face down, then they can set another trap directly from the deck, which is +1 for them, which is crazy. And for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, your opponent cannot activate trap cards. So it's at 2, it's TCG forbidden and OCG at 1. So of course this is good against trap heavy decks like maybe Labyrinth or Eldritch. But in any other case, it's not that good, and traps aren't like often played in other decks. So this is a really niche card, but I would also say Labyrinth and Eldritch are not around very much at the moment. So this is always a niche card, but right now I wouldn't even call it a niche card. Next one is, we know it, the good old Ash Blossom. I don't think I have to read it to you. And as I already said, as long as Maxi is a meta card, I think Ash Blossom is too. You have to say that Ash Blossom against Spright isn't that good. There are better options or better decks, better use cases for it against other decks. But of course, you can always like Ash if they play the runic variant, which is the strongest, they can Ash the Fountain, they can Ash the Hugin. So there's always a use case for Ash against every deck. And as I already said, one of the main reasons is this counters Max C. So these both, they go basically hand in hand. And the last hand trap we had, which I also had to look up because I didn't know what it does, is Token Collector. So this is the guy, and if a token is special summoned, you can special summon this card from the graveyard or hand, and then you can use the effect and destroy as many tokens as they are on the field, and this card gains 400 attack for each token destroyed. Okay, so this is super niche. Like, when can you ever use this? Maybe against Swordsoul because they produce these tokens, but let's imagine this. So the opponent plays an Swordsoul of Mogi and makes a token. Then you play this guy and destroy the token, which is cool because then they cannot continue their play. But what you could have also done is they play Swordsoul of Mogi and then you use Infinite Impermanence, and yeah, it's the same effect. The only difference is that this can be used on basically everything, and this can be used only on tokens. So I think there will never be a meta, let's not say that. I guess there will never be a meta where maybe sometimes there comes a deck which heavily relies on tokens. It's the best deck in the meta, and then this thing could be meta. But for now, come on, I would not even call this a niche card, because I mean it is a niche card, obviously, but even for that, it's not a good card. Don't put it anywhere in your deck. And that concludes our list for the HandTrap tier list for our current format, the March format, the Spright format. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give me your feedback in the comments. Abonnate. No, that's not the real. Subscribe. Oh, that's it. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and yeah, that would support me very much. And I hope we are seeing each other in the next one.